Instruction in world history in the so-called high schools is even today in a very sorry condition. Few teachers understand that the aim of studying history can never be to learn historical dates and events by heart and recite them by rote. That what matters is not whether the child knows exactly when this or that battle was fought, when a general was born, or even when a monarchy, usually or a very insignificant one, came into the crown of his forefathers. No, by the living God, this is unimportant, very unimportant. To learn history means to seek and find the focus, which are the causes leading to the effects which we subsequently perceive as historical events. The art of reading as of learning is this: to retain the essential, to forget the non-essential. Perhaps it affected my whole later life that good fortune sent me a history teacher who was one of the few to observe this principle in teaching and examining. Dr. Leopold Post, my professor at the Realschule in Linz, embodied this requirement to an ideal degree. This old gentleman's manner was as kind as it was determined. His dazzling eloquence not only held us spellbound, but actually carried us away. Even today, I think back with gentle emotion on this gray haired man who, by the fire of his narratives, sometimes made us forget the present, who as if by who as if by enchantment carried us into past times out of the millennial veils of mist molded by historical memories into living reality. On such occasions we sat there, often aflame with enthusiasm, and sometimes even moved into tears. What made our good fortune all the greater was that this teacher knew how to illuminate the past by examples from the present, and how from the past to draw inferences for the present. As a result, he had more understanding than anyone else for all the daily problems which then held us breathless. He used our budding nationalistic fanatism as a means of educating us, frequently appealing to our sense of natural honor. By this alone, he was able to discipline us little ruffians more easily than would have been possible by any other means. This teacher made history my favorite subject, and indeed, though he had no such intention, it was then that I became a little revolutionary. For who could have studied German history under such a teacher without becoming an enemy of the state which, though its ruling house exerted so disastrous an influence on the destinies of the nation? And who could retain his loyalty to the dynasty which in past and present betrayed the needs of the German people again and again for shameless private advantage? Do we not know, even as little boys, that the Austrian state had and could have no love for us Germans? Our historical knowledge of the works of the House of Habsburg was reformed by our daily experience. In the north and south, the poison of foreign nations gnawed at the body of our nationality, and even Vienna was visibly becoming more and more of an un-German city. The royal house strategized wherever possible, and it was the hand of the goddess of the eternal justice and inexorable retribution which caused Archduke Francis Ferdinand, the most mortal enemy of Austrian Germanism, to fall by the bullets which he himself had helped to mold. For uh, for had he not been the patron of Austria's salvations from above, immense were the burdens which the German people were expected to bear, inconceivable their sacrifices in taxes and blood, and yet anyone who was not totally blind was bound to recognize that all this would be in vain. What pained us most was the fact that the entire system was morally whitewashed by an alliance with Germany, with the result of the slow extermination of Germanism in the old monarchy was in a certain sense sanctioned by Germany itself. The Habsburg hypocrisy, which enabled the Austrian rulers to create the outward appearance that Austria was a German state, raised the hatred toward this house to the flaming indignation and at the same time contempt. Only in its Reich itself, the men who even then were called to power saw nothing of all this, as though stricken with blindness that lived by the side of a corpse, and in the symptoms of rottenness saw only the signs of new life. The unholy alliance of the young rich and the Syrian sham state contained the germ of the subsequent World War and of the collapse as well. In the course of this book, I shall have occasion to take up this problem at length. Here it is suffices to state that even in my earliest youth I came to the basic insight which never left me, but only became more profound, that Germanism be safeguarded only by the destruction of Austria, and furthermore, the national sentiment is in no sense identical with dynastic patriotism, that above all the House of Habsburg was designed to be the misfortune of the German nation. Even then I had drawn the consequences from the realization our ardent love for my German Austrian homeland, deep hatred for the Austrian state. The habit of historical thinking, which I thus learned in school, has never left me in the intervening years. To an ever increasing extent, world history became for me an inexhaustible source of understanding for the historical events of the present, in the other words, for politics. I do not want to learn it, I want to instruct me. Thus, at an early age, I had become a political revolutionary, and I became an artistic revolutionary at an equal early age. The provincial capital of Upper Austria had at that time a theater which was, relatively speaking, not bad. Pretty much of everything was produced. At the age of 12, I saw Wilhelm Tell for the first time, and a few months later, my first opera, Lohengrin. I was captivated at once. My youthful enthusiasm for the master of Bayram knew no bounds. Again and again I was drawn to his works, and it still seems to me especially fortunate that the modest professional performance left me open to intensify experience later on. All this particularly after I had outgrown my adolescence, which in my case was an exceptional painful process, reinforced my profound distaste for the profession which my father had chosen for me. My convictions grew stronger and stronger that I would never be happy as a civil servant. The fact that by this time my gift for drawing had been recognized at the World Show made my determination all the firmer. Neither pleas nor threats could change it one bit. I wanted to become a painter, and no power in the world could make me a civil servant. Yet, strange as it may seem, with the passing years I become more and more interested in architecture, and at the time I regarded this as a neutral complement to my gift as a painter, and only rejoiced inwardly at the extension of my artistic scope. I did not suspect that things would turn out differently. The question of my profession was to be decided more quickly than I had previously expected. In my 13th year, I suddenly lost my father. A stroke of paralysis felled the old gentleman who was otherwise so tall, thus painlessly ending his earthly pilgrimage, plunging us all into the depths of grief. His most ardent desire had been to help his son forge his career, thus preserving him from his own bitter experience. In this, to all appearances, he had not succeeded, but though unwittingly he had sown the seed for the future which at that time neither he nor I would have comprehended. For the moment there was no outward change. My mother, to be sure, felt obligated to continue my education in accordance with my father's wish, in other words, to have me study for the civil servant's career. I, for my part, was more than ever determined absolutely not to undertake this career. In the proportion as my schooling departed from my ideal in the subject matter and curriculum, I became more indifferent at heart. Then suddenly illness came to my help, and a few weeks decided my future and the internal domestic squall. As a result of my serious lung ailment, a physician advised my mother in most urgent terms never send me into an office. My attendance at the Royal School had furthermore to be interrupted for at least a year. The goal for which I had so silently yearned, for which I had always fought, had through this event suddenly became reality almost of its own accord. Concerned over my illness, my mother finally conceded to take me out of the Royal School and let me attend the academy. These were the happiest days of my life, and seemed to me almost a dream, and a mere dream it was to remain. 2 years later, the death of my mother put a sudden end to my high-flown plans. It was the conclusion of a long and painful illness which from the beginning left little hope of recovery. Yet it was a dreadful blow, particularly for me. I had honored my father, but my mother I had loved. Poverty and hard reality now compelled me to take a quick decision. What little my father had left had been largely exhausted by my mother's grave illness. The orphan's pension to which was entitled was not enough for me to live on, and so I was faced with the problem of somehow making my own living. In my hand a suitcase full of clothes and underwear, in my heart an endowment well, a journey to Vienna. I too hoped to wrest from fate what my father had accomplished 50 years before. I too wanted to become something, but on no account a civil servant.